Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. I'm your host, Dave. I'm joined with my co host, Greg, and we have a doozy for you on this mid October night session. It's a
Yeah.
night session.
Oh,
You guys are
yeah.
probably listening in the day, but it's a night session, as it always is
Dark
for
and
us.
stormy night, or could be, right?
But I mean,
The
it's
leaves
not,
are
but it could.
rustling outside.
It really could be, though, but it's
Yeah,
not.
but I'll tell you something else. My jack-o'-lanterns are glowing on the doorsteps, and that's true.
Is that what you call your son, Jack Lantern?
No, well, listen. Let me get your take on something. We carved a few jack-o'-lanterns, and one was a dinosaur, and one was like a winking pumpkin, and I chose to go with the standard triangles and jagged mouth.
Yes.
And I think you light them up, and the one that stands out is the classic, the traditional sort of route. And I think, what's your take on that? Are you into like newfangled sort of modern takes on the jack-o'-lantern? Are you the tried and true Charlie Brown? Let's get this thing going because it's Halloween and we want to keep with traditions. I know how you feel about traditions, Dave. I almost know what your answer to this is.
Well, I do like different variations of a classic face.
Okay.
So I'll make it like, yeah, use the classic shapes, but try to make it look different teeth patterns, different eye styles, things
Yeah.
like that.
You're right about that. So here's this year's twist. One triangle eye, one square eye.
Oh boy. Oh
Yeah,
boy.
it's really something. It
Wow.
pops. You know what I mean? You're walking by it, and it stops in your tracks a little bit. You
So
see it, and you want to know
I
more.
I really appreciate the classic style, like you said, but I will once in a while I'll also do like a special pumpkin. Like
Mm.
did one where I shaved the top of it, like the lid. I shaved it so it was like just like the no peel on it. And then I made it look
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
brain.
yeah.
I made it look like a brain. I did like little patterns in it to make it look like a brain. So it looked like
I thought you were gonna.
his brain was
That's beautiful.
exposed. It was cool.
I thought you were gonna do like I did a little homage to my co-host and just made a bald pumpkin.
Oh, I could do that. That's what I'll
That
do
would be
for work.
nice.
We have a pumpkin jack-o'-lantern contest at work, actually. I'm gonna do a Greg pumpkin.
Okay.
Wow, I didn't
All you
even
have to
think
do
of
is
that. Thank you,
all you have to
Greg.
do is like cut the little horn off, and there you go.
And it needs a
Maybe
mustache.
maybe a little mustache and maybe
Oh
stick hat.
man, you just gave me the best idea for me and the worst idea for you. That's so awesome. Thank you.
I know. It's gonna be very embarrassing for me. But hey, let's get into it. Dave,
Very
it's
embarrassing.
it's so rare that I'm impressed when it's
It's
not
rare
rare
when
at
you're
all.
impressed. What?
It's yeah, no, it's a wrong sort of approach there. I am impressed when people are self-taught at various things. I mean, like piano, Mozart,
Yep.
like guitar, when people are like self-taught at these things. And today we're going to be talking about a couple self-taught individuals, and they happen to be star-crossed lovers, to quote
Hmm.
Shakespeare. It's a very and we both listened to an interview with one of these people, which was actually kind of interesting and fun to do. But it's like an old-timey romance in every way, except for one thing. They would be intimately connected with the most well-known hauntings in the world. And I mean the most well-known hauntings, right? We're talking about a self-taught clairvoyant, Lorraine, and a self-taught, this is a little more intense, demonologist, which is weird. I don't know how you become self-taught in that. But Ed Warren, and in fact, Dave, I don't know if you knew this, but this is the fact that I didn't find in the research, but I had heard this because I was interested in the subject a while back and for a while. But Ed was the only person sanctioned by the Catholic Church to perform exorcisms.
But it came with limitations.
Okay, but like the fact that they were, and yes, so obviously you do know more
He's
about it
not
than I do.
actually able to do full exorcisms.
So he needs what is
Exorcisms light. Let's put it that way.
okay, but like where do you even? They gave him a pass for what? For like sort
He can like
of
walk
I
through
don't-
the house and like talk to a ghost. They're like, that's
okay,
cool. But
that's big.
you're not preying on that possessed person.
All right, yeah, because they want to. It's almost like a union. Then they want to keep their powers for themselves,
Well,
right?
he's not, you know,
Ordained.
ordained through the church. So
Hmm.
I'm sure in their eyes, he doesn't have the ability to do these things.
But they
Greg,
do recognize some sort of talent.
do I impress you? I'm a
Dave, of course.
self-taught podcaster. You don't know
Oh
any of
yeah.
those.
Well, I'm self-taught too, but I'm terrible at it.
I was gonna say, mm.
I
Okay.
learned it by watching you, all right? Remember that old drug commercial?
I love that. I say that all the time.
Yeah,
It's one of my
that's
favorite
me
quotes
too.
right there.
Me and my
And
sister
nobody gets
love
it.
that. My sister and I love that quote too. Dave, take us to the beginning
Yeah,
with,
and
you know.
just some basics. Well, one of the things is like so they're both from Connecticut, right? And
Mhm,
Ed is from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Um Catholic home. His father was a police officer, I believe. One of the things though that stands out is that Ed claims that he grew up in a haunted house from the ages of 5 to 12. Um, and his father, being that Catholic police officer figure, would often say, like, things to like, we can make logic out of everything, or, there's an explanation for everything. One of the quotes Ed said is, his father would say to him, is, Ed, there's a logical reason for everything that happens in this house, almost like trying to justify the things that were happening
yeah,
in the house, while at the same time kind of pointing out there's a lot of stuff going on in the house,
right.
right? Doesn't
Like, the
that statement
chairs are
kind of say
floating
that?
around the room and, you know, like,
Yeah,
all like, everything's kind of in disarray and the lights are on and off and the walls are banging and you can picture this police officer saying, "There's a logical explanation for any of this
right,
that's happening."
right.
Which
One of
is like,
the
you know, growing up Catholic, you remember, right? Where it's like, there's no ghost because everything and when you die, you either go you there's 2 places you go.
hmm, yeah,
Oh, maybe
I don't remember.
3.
I don't
Maybe,
really
you know,
remember having those
purgatory.
conversations as a kid. So,
Oh,
but I'm sure
okay.
you did. I'm sure you did.
No,
Uh,
I did, and it was always, like, very, like, if someone's not in heaven, they're bad.
I think you're in heaven right now because there's like this light coming from the top of your head right now. Do you see that? No.
Sorry.
There you go. You
Yeah.
moved. You're not in
Yeah.
heaven anymore. All right. One of the things though that he reported that happened that kind of stood out to him was he would report that like sometimes his closet door would open and a light would form, and it would form in the spherical shape. And he would see a face on the ball of light, and one of them that stuck out to him, like, this was this older woman that he saw, and she just looked really unpleasant, and this became known as a ghost globule, this ball
Mm,
of light. And he says the ball would come out into his bedroom, and then he would hear footsteps and heavy breathing, and the room would become icy cold, which they refer to as a psychic cold. So this was like kind of, his first, I guess, I don't know if it's his first, but like a bigger impactful moment, and where he started to like understand that like some of these spirits didn't look like they were having a good time. They weren't there partying. They were there, you know, I'm sure at this time he probably wasn't able to wrap his head around it, but I think what he ended up kind of figuring out down the road is like they're there against their own like will, right? Or they're
yeah.
like they're not able to move on.
Tormented sort of thing. It does sound like he experienced maybe sleep paralysis in the typical sort of old hag syndrome that
Sure.
sort of coincides with that. So it seems like maybe from there he and we'll talk about how that develops and how, you know, there's that great Maslow's hammer thing that we've talked about before when we were talking about, I think, you know, the Malleus Maleficarum, where it's like if your only tool is a hammer, it's easy to start to see things only as nails. So it's like, okay, now I'm seeing the world. There's definitely this ghost presence, and I'm gonna look and I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna validate this experience for the rest of my life. I
Yeah.
mean, that could be something that's happening there.
And we'll speak a little bit about the rest of the family's experience, like very briefly at towards the end. But later on, it sounds like he claims that he wasn't alone in some of the experiences. And then on the flip side, Lorraine, she also grew up in a very Catholic home, and it sounds like her home was a little bit more like traditionally Catholic, or maybe stricter Catholic. And it was kind of like a don't talk about things vibe as well there. And but her experience was different because she would see people's, I guess now we would call it your aura, right? Or
Mhm.
like energy. Like she would see light coming from people, and that light would kind of like represent what their energy was like. And the thing with her is because of her experience, of not talking about things, she kind of assumed everybody else saw these too.
Yeah, you know
And
what's interesting?
that's weird, right? It's
It
a weird
is
thing to think
weird.
about.
It's weird because and you're thinking like in terms of would I believe this? Would I not believe this? It's like it's a kind of an interesting thing if someone was like, "Oh, I see your aura and it's this color and it means that strong and loving and all these great things about you, you'd be like, "Yeah, I think I kind of believe in this aura thing." But if it was something negative about you, you'd be like, "Ah, whatever." Right? Is that the kind
Oh
of way
yeah,
you would
no,
approach it?
I had a patient say that he sees auras, and he said like, and I see like this white around you, and I'm like, nice. Was white's good, right? And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, it's really good. I'm like, oh yeah, definitely.
So you totally validate that. You're like, "Yes, that's the thing, I think. I think that's I'm
If he
pretty
told
sure
me he
that's."
saw like darkness coming from me,
Yeah.
well, maybe I still would have been like, oh, cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's some people wouldn't though, right? Like if it feels good, you're gonna go along with it.
And maybe she learns that early on to where, like, you can kind of find a way to make people believe what you're saying if it sort of validates their own experience. So they're
Yeah, and
like,
good or
as we're going
bad.
through this,
Good
good or
or
bad,
bad. If she
yeah.
goes into an experience and she tells people that like, oh yeah, there's definitely a negative presence there, and that's what they want to hear
Mhm.
because that's what they're curious about, then yeah, they're gonna be like, see, she's right.
Well, it's that, and if you're one of these families going through a horrific, quote unquote haunting, what she's going to be providing her and Ed is an answer. And when you have an answer, then you can start solving the problem, and that's what we want to do. We want to solve problems as human beings. That's what we're always looking for
Yeah,
problems to solve. And
of
you're
course.
like, hey, I got this problem in my house. These things are going on. Like my family's acting weird, and my kids are behaving a certain way. Shit's flying off the walls. Like we need an answer.
Yeah.
And they're like,
I'm
we can
always saying
provide
that
that.
to you, Greg. I'm like, dude, stop trying to solve all my problems. Just listen to me for once, please.
And I'm like, "I have an
Couple
answer. I need to give an answer." That's what we
podcast and
do.
couples therapy we need.
But, yeah, we might need that at some point, but not yet. I think we're stronger than ever, to be honest. So, Dave, I listened to that podcast that was essentially like so I guess you were calling it a podcast, but what it is, it's like a taped interview with Lorraine Warren while she was alive, which is kinda cool. And, she talks about this nice little love story, but when I was thinking, like, she created this love story, and we gotta take that with a grain of salt, right? Because we'll find out things down the road that, this is someone who's in the business of creating a narrative to manipulate people's behavior and kinda see her a certain way. It's almost like she is the original CBT practitioner, right? She sort of, like, creates these stories to change the way people feel about certain things, and I think that's kind
Sure.
of interesting.
Well, I mean, doesn't don't we all?
We tr yes, Dave, actually,
Especially
I believe that we do.
if you're so one thing we have to keep in mind, and like I am so sorry to people who are like Ed and Lorraine Warren like enthusiasts and
Mm.
believe everything, because you have to remember, aside from being a beautiful story, being like very fantastical and like all the things that make us like want to be have like interest, we also have to remember they're also a business.
They're our business.
They are a business. They're a brand, right? So they have to have a storyline that makes people care about them, believe them, trust them. And some of the things that we've found out later in life don't really fall in line with those things, right?
Absolutely, and that's kind of exactly what I was trying to say, but you just kind of articulated that a little bit better than me. And I won't say as usual. But anyways, so the thing like to go on with that story is she never dated anyone else, maybe. But again, part of the story.
Maybe.
And
Why
she
did
she
you hear
I
contradictory
heard things. I heard
really?
things.
Oh,
No, I didn't. So
yeah.
she because they were so young, so she knew the second she saw Ed, she said that with
Yeah.
her clairvoyance, she
Yep.
saw him as the man he would become almost on his deathbed, right?
Yeah, she saw him. So at the time of this taped interview that we both listened to, they were both still alive, but Ed was not doing well. I guess he had
Yeah.
fallen or something, and he had like double pneumonia or something like that. And she had pretty much seen his decline at
Mhm.
this current moment, which she
Yeah.
didn't
You don't
see
have to be a
later.
clairvoyant to say double pneumonia when you're, like, 80 is not great.
Right,
That's the
right. But it's interesting. She she had a premonition of him at this point of the time
Mhm.
of the taping, not of like when he's eventually passes. It's just an interesting thing, I guess. So
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but that is what she claims.
Yeah, and again, like you mentioned, they're obviously both brought up Catholic and experienced their own paranormal activity that they knew to keep to themselves because of the nature of their faith and everything like that. Like,
Yeah,
like,
they were
but
16, 17, I think, when they first met.
yeah. Yeah, and
Super
he and
young,
so
super young.
they're young, and she had her visions, and Ed, had his, like you mentioned, his haunted house. So bad, Dave, that he would sleep outside if no one was home. And he claimed that clergy was always blessing his house. So his father, you're right, was kind of playing both sides of the fence there because he must be having priests come in and say, "Hey, look, there's stuff going on here, and I'm trying to like hold it all together with my kids and everything like that."
Yeah.
Um,
So that's the difference between two families, in my opinion, from a very, very like brief like introduction to Ed and Lorraine. Like it sounds like Lorraine's family is more like strict, like we don't believe in that stuff because it goes against kind of our religion, our religious views. And Ed's is more like we just don't talk about it.
right,
We're not
and
going to
he
talk
did.
about it out loud.
Ed, you can speak to this too, right? Like Ed did have an older brother who kind of should have been there for him.
Yeah, and I'll share a little bit of that later when we talk in a little
Okay.
bit. Yep.
So here they are, they're 16, 17 years old. Ed decides at 17, "Hey, look, I'm gonna join the Navy." And he did. Before he was 18 years old, he had been across the North Atlantic 4 times, which is kinda crazy. He was
Yep.
also on a ship that sank,
Yep.
and they were married on one of his, leaves, which is, like, when he had, like, I guess, quote, unquote, "vacation" from the Navy or time off from the Navy. They got married, and they would stay married until, he died in, what, 2006? Somewhere around there? So
Um
I I think it's
yeah, 2006. Yep.
so they hadn't said anything to each other. Like, they got married, they must have found something in common, but they didn't reveal to each other, according to them, that they shared this sort of spiritual connection to the other side. And they decided together, but Ed especially wanted to satisfy this curiosity that started in childhood that sort of interrupted his youth, and they decided to pursue this as they were artists, they were other things, but nothing was really panning out as much as this idea to sort of which is interesting because it's a form of art too that they would sort of develop a story and become these very like, you know,
Yeah.
Bible thumping, very like
Well,
everything's the devil kind of thing.
think about this. So he has the ship his he has a near death experience, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
right? So he's a
Yes.
survivor of his a shipwreck, right?
Yes.
He's a near death experience. Later in life, he gets super involved, but it's probably the interest was always there, but he just acts on it. But I wonder how that near death experience also played into this desire to just be to learn more about what's on the other side, you know? You have a near death experience and suddenly like your path in life goes into ghost hunting,
Or
paranormal
like what's
investigations.
I guess it's like, what's important? I guess you could frame it like that, but you say you have a near death experience, and we've all had these experiences where we
I've
should
never
be
been on a
given.
shipwreck though. That
I've come close, and my grandfather has been on a shipwreck.
really,
Yeah. So I've been on a ship that's collided with another ship, but the other ship happened to wreck, and we kind of just kept going.
and it was a raft.
It
The other
was
ship
not a
was a
raft. It
raft.
was it was actually a fishing boat, and it was a horrible mistake. Like, we couldn't turn in time. Yeah, no, but it's interesting though because, these things happen in life and you're like, "Oh, this should give me perspective for the rest of life and, like, change the way I sort of behave," but, like, how often do those things really happen where, you're like, someone close to you dies or something, it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna start living in every moment." How long does that usually last, you know? Was this experience big enough for them to be like, "I'm gonna hunt ghosts forever?"
Think
Or
about
maybe
this
it gives
though.
them this.
He has the childhood experiences, right? So
Yeah,
so what he reports are significant childhood experiences. I think that would be terrifying to see
yeah,
floating balls of light with old people's faces on them while I'm trying to sleep at 2 and 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning being the
yeah.
witching hour, as they would tell you, or the ghost hour, or whatever they call it. Um, that would be freaking terrifying. So he has that experience, then he has the near death experience. It kind of fits into the psyche of just being like leading into someone who's going to be very curious about these things, right?
Well, yeah, I guess,
Life,
well, you do what
death.
you know, right? And Dave, in the same way that, you and I have experienced, anxiety and depression, and, you feel that, and then you feel, compelled to help other people that feel it because it gives you this sort of empathy.
Yeah.
Maybe, if I'm being generous here, maybe it's the same sort of thing where Ed experienced this terror in youth, and he's like, "This is a thing, this is out there." and I'm gonna do what I can to sort of alleviate the suffering in others. If I can do something to kind of, help people through this, great. And if I make a couple bucks along the way, even better.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to share from my understanding, and people can definitely correct me if I'm wrong. Especially in the beginning, I don't know about later investigations. They weren't charging people for investigations, so he was doing it merely just for the sake of being able to do it. As far as I'm aware, maybe there was some money at some point, but I do believe that when he first started, they were free. It was more about just feeding into his curiosity and um trying to help people, but also more of his genuine inquisitiveness about this.
Dave, my theory on that is they're both art students. They both came from art school and they're both artists. So wait, before you start really making money on your art, what you have to do is develop a portfolio. So before they start making money on these, paranormal investigations, they have to develop this portfolio and get sort of a reputation. So it's like they got to get hooked into the biggest and best and most interesting cases. And once they sort of compile enough, then they can start charging, then they can start selling their
Well, that's what I
information,
was
their
going to
stories.
say. The
Yeah.
real money comes from the book and movie deals, obviously, right? And they've
Yeah.
done plenty of those. There's
Which isn't, yeah, it's almost like
plenty.
they have a knack for that.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And they're
So
actually involved in like a lot of the movies, or Lorraine even was in The Conjuring. She made a guest appearance.
she
It's
did, which is interesting.
yeah.
A great cameo, actually.
Hmm.
Um, and, even that first Conjuring movie, which we'll talk about briefly. There's a Rhode Island tie to that too. When they're giving this talk, and how cool would this have been in college? They're giving this like talk in Providence College, and they're talking about like all these different sort of investigations they've been on. It's like this lecture in college. And then some people here and they're interested because they know the Perone family who is in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and they're struggling with this stuff, and that's sort of how they connect. But they before we get into that, they did what develop some kind of similar to taps here in Rhode Island in the past. So they had their own
Well,
group, right?
1952, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, which is the oldest ghost hunting group in New England.
Yeah, when we talked about the paranormal, well, parapsychology, there's uh, something about cyclical research. They're sort of borrowing that name from the original groups that um, founded this field.
Hmm.
The Center for Cyclical Research or something like that. I can't remember what it is. But Dave, this sort of leads us into. I guess we don't need to get into every single investigation, but I think we should touch on a little bit on all the big ones, and not even one of the ones that Lorraine claims to be involved in, and I know you listened to that interview, it's like the original Exorcist story, she was involved
Yeah.
in that. So it's like they wanna like insert themselves. They're like this a paranormal Forrest Gump where they insert themselves in every little piece of, spiritual ghostly history. It's interesting
Right.
how they manage to shoehorn themselves in all these different things. And I say shoehorn specifically, and we'll talk about um one of these the Enfield poltergeist where they really do kind of force themselves in. But let's talk about the big ones. Maybe we'll go back and forth. So maybe you can start with like what do we got here? The ones that people will know about.
Well, the first one, and you can give some of the details here, but obviously Annabelle is probably the most notable, aside from The Conjuring, one that got really famous from the films. So Annabelle was another one, and as we've mentioned before, because we actually covered this in our Creepy Dolls episode. um it's not an actual it's not the doll that you see in the movies. It is a
No.
Raggedy Ann doll. But yeah, that one's obviously a very big one.
Huge, right? And it's interesting because dolls are freaky to begin with, and supposedly inhibited by the spirit of Annabelle Higgins. But that was actually, well, according to the Warrens, a front to manipulate and infiltrate these roommates, these two women. They wanted to infiltrate their homes, their lives, and eventually, Dave, their soul.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
there was
what
a
that.
boyfriend involved in that was like very like, ew, this doll does not belong here.
Mhm.
And supposedly the doll like attempts to strangle him at one point. Yeah, it's a wild story.
It's scary. That one's actually scary because they don't really have this, like, weird history that some of these other families will have. I don't know. That one's scary, and if you wanted to learn more about that, obviously, we have an episode on it. And one personal favorite of mine is that I love that original Conjuring movie, that first Conjuring movie. I think
Yeah.
it's great. And that's the Perron family, and I've listened to interviews with them as well, which is actually really interesting. The true story, quote unquote, is actually a lot more elaborate and intense than the movie itself. They left a lot out, and this is all about the curse of Bathsheba Sherman. Um, the land's cursed, like just a really dark story, and um,
Can I
just
drop a little Conjuring
yeah, drop
House
something.
like
Yeah.
anecdotal story? So I reached out to the Conjuring House current owners, which it's changed hands a few times, and the newest owners have been doing a lot of like events there and stuff like that. I think this was last year or so. Um so I'd reached out to see if they wanted to collab on doing like an event there, and they shot it down.
Mhm.
They offered some other stuff that we could do, but it was like really high pricing. And then a month later, I think there was a fire, and I was like, that might have been karma, not Bathsheba, but
Oh,
there's
wow.
a lot of stuff
Here's the
going
thing, you
on
should have
over
let me
there.
know. A friend of mine, is he's actually a local guy, like, working on a true crime, podcast, developing it
Mhm.
for a crime that happened in Rhode Island that's unsolved. But anyways, he's a realtor, and he's the one that sold that house.
Went
And
for
the reason why they want to charge you so much is because it was in excess of, over $1,000,000 to
Oh
buy
yeah,
that
but I
house.
mean the people buying that know what they're doing. They
Oh,
know they can
yeah,
get
they
people
know.
to pay. They're doing like tours, they're doing overnights, they're doing like movie screenings there, and they're charging a pretty penny because they know people will pay to watch The Conjuring in the backyard of the Conjuring house.
That's
People
absolutely,
will
of course
pay.
people will do
I know
that.
people have done it. Yeah. So
Alright, Dave, maybe and here's another one that and you can
yeah, the Amityville house,
I mean,
right?
that's the biggest
This
one.
and I'm not even gonna say much about this one because this is one episode that I truly loved that we did because
Okay.
it spanned two stories but both interconnected, which was really cool. So we have an episode, I think it was called The Amityville House from DeFeo to Lutz, we titled it.
Mm.
Because yeah, there was obviously we know like the Amityville movie, which was the Lutz family, but the DeFeo murders happened first, and that's where supposedly like the man was possessed and murdered his entire family, and the storyline there, and we actually talked about that quite a bit. There was a lot of controversy about whether some conversations happened in between after that murder before the next family moved in about, hey, can we build a scheme here to kind of
Mhm.
cash in on the fact that like maybe there was something that possessed this man to kill his family, and some
It's almost like,
conversations
yeah,
were overheard.
they're like ghost yeah, it's like ghost consultants. They're there to kind of I think, "Hey, look, let us get involved in this
I
story. We
don't
can all
think they
probably
were
do pretty
it,
well with this."
now that I'm thinking about it though, they weren't the ones involved in that conversation. There was another paranormal
There's a
investigator. I can't
lawyer
Yeah,
and
but
George
they
Lutz.
they did come in and they held a séance and things like that. Um, but yeah, and they definitely and I've even heard other people kind of state this. They definitely like made their involvement in the Amityville case seem a lot bigger than it actually was.
And
Because
that's
there was
kind
a
of a
lot
through
of
line for
other investigators that were probably even more involved than they were.
And, you're right to recommend that episode because it's literally like it's a true crime story with a paranormal,
Hmm.
twist in the actual true crime story, followed directly by a straight up paranormal tale where a family has this ordeal and they're out of the house 26 days after moving in. And it's just kind of it's the premier ghost story in America, I think. The Enfield poltergeist is, if you're German is a little rusty. It means noisy spirit. That's what poltergeist means. Hopefully, I've mentioned that before. This was another possession case. They're going to start to get into those quite a bit, but most of it was thought to be a hoax. The children were just starved for attention. They were kind of like looking to do things to get their parents around more, their mother around more. And there was just a ton of controversy around this one, especially with the Warrens, because they weren't invited at all. They had just heard about it and they showed up and they played no significant role. They weren't helpful, but they wanted to add this interesting tale to their lore, to their portfolio. They wanted this to be a part of their, they could this is part of their mythology, right?
Yeah.
Another horrific tale,
So that one was turned into a film as well, which I believe is
of
a
course.
haunting in Connecticut, right?
No, that one's actually it's just Conjuring 2. I can't remember the
Oh,
Electric
this is
Boogaloo.
this is the one that's
It's a Conjuring
overseas.
series, yeah.
It's
Yes.
overseas.
So this one's overseas. This one's in England.
Okay.
Yeah, and the
Oh, all right.
so this
All right.
one is in the Conjuring universe, and the next one is too.
All right. So, and then Arnie Johnson is the next case, and he was the one that was accused of killing his landlord. And then
Yes.
they would get a hold of this story because there was a family connection.
Yep.
All right. So, and then Johnson attempted to plead not guilty by reason of possession, that he was possessed, and that was,
The Devil Made Me
but it was
Do
The
It.
Conjuring 3. The
That's the
Devil Made Me Do It, right?
That's right, yeah. And then the next one is The Haunting in Connecticut, the Snedeker
Okay.
house. And this is, that's the one with no, I remember this one quite a bit because it was a former funeral home. It was all like the nail clippings and everything. That was the movie. But this funeral home was infested with evil spirits, and that's kind of portrayed in the movie. But it was also on this great show, Dave, that you have to have some awareness about just being who you are. I used to watch this show all the time on the Discovery Channel, and the name of the show was A Haunting.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen that?
No.
They would do these great little what are they, like, reenactments or dramatizations of, like, what happened, so
Yeah.
good, and it would show, like, what the family was going through, and in this case, there was some alcoholism, there's some drug addiction, I think I said addition there, but when you're thinking about drugs and alcohol being involved in one of these paranormal cases, it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like, if you have been dealing with a haunting and it's real and it's the way they portray it, it's like, yes, some people are gonna turn to drugs and alcohol to kind of get away from
True.
it,
Well,
right?
the same in the case of the Amityville with Ron
Mhm.
DeFeo. There was, claims that he was heavy into drugs and alcohol, right? Before, the murders. And did
Yep.
that play a piece of it? I guess you could make that same argument. What came first? How is someone coping when they're being stressed out by being haunted?
Yeah.
Or is some of this stuff more like, they're using that ghosts and things like that as an excuse while, trying to cover up the fact that they're using drugs and alcohol. I don't know.
But something going on with this one is like, so the author, this guy Ray Garton, he's writing an account of this, you know, he's trying to figure out how to like put this into a book, which he would. He gets this quote from a paranormal investigator named Benjamin Radford, and this is what he says of Lorraine. He says, "If she told me the sun would come up tomorrow, I would get a second opinion."
Yeah.
So that's one person's take on Lorraine, and I don't really know how many people feel that way, but there is certainly starting to be this thing where it's like, they like to come in and they like to grab a hold of the narrative and spin it the way they want it to be spun. Like if there's a chance to get the family thinking, "Hey, look, you're haunted and you need help here," then they're gonna do that. Because like you said early on, this is a business.
The part that like starts to come out when you look at all these stories and you kind of you're thinking about like their involvement or what they're doing with these families. There is like this little tinge of like, this is like it kind of starts to feel gross. Like
Yeah.
if somebody's abusing drugs and alcohol and then you're going in there telling them that there's paranormal stuff going on in their house and if it's not, like let's say they are not being honest or they're kind of trying to spin a story, that's not great. That's got
And
a
no.
really gross tinge to it. It's
Well, here's the
manipulation.
thing. When someone says, how there's like when we're growing up Catholic, there's this big emphasis on don't. don't use God's name in vain, right? And it's like as a kid, you think it's only this, you're saying a swear with God's name attached to it. You think that's using God's name in vain. But I think what really is happening when you're using God's name in vain is like you're taking the Warrens, if they're, we're just saying, say they're, embellishing a lot of this, then they're using spirituality and they're using God's name. Hey, we're going to come help you. We're very religious. The Catholic Church is into us. We're you going to use God's name to help your family. And really all they're trying to do is make some money. So you're right, it's gross. And they are using God's name to kind of get something sort of
Yeah.
deceitful, which is dark.
Now, on the flip side,
Flip it.
one thing that you just said that we kind of gleamed over a little bit is they are heavy into utilizing like faith as like a part of the whole rationale why this stuff's happening to people. Maybe lack of faith for is the causation for some of this possession and things like that. um but also just kind of working with the church and kind of utilizing like the religious plot themes in the way that they're conceptualizing things. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
It's heavy into it. Is that because they want the church to have their back? I don't know. Is it because they truly, it's just who they are and they're utilizing their religion in a way to effectively fight off this paranormal activity that's happening? I'm not sure, but that is a really huge piece of this. Like they are very religious.
Well, it's like built-in clout. It's like they have some accountability, they have some value already, because it's like people, they're like, hey, look, this is what's happening here. You can like look at this up in the Bible. The Catholic Church believes in this kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
like they have some credibility already, because it's like someone, we're talking like a lot of these things are going on in the 60s, 70s, 80s, where like there's a huge majority of people, especially in New England, that are do you remember how many people used to be going to church every
Yeah.
Sunday back then? I mean, it was
It
pretty
felt like everybody.
standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did feel like everybody. So it's not like this weird thing where people are like, well, if the Catholic Church says they're behind this, then I guess, I who am I to say
Yeah.
that, this can't be real,
I
right?
will say if uh some kind of entity was going to possess either one of us, if they were to like take a look at our lives, it would be me.
Hmm.
And Lorraine would agree with this. She was very against using or dabbling in the occult, and the fact that I dabble, like I have all those. It's just a collection, but just even having Ouija boards and all that stuff, she would tell you is like a no. You shouldn't even get involved in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Like, I think that she would warn to never get involved with the cult practice. Like, don't look into it. But like, why? Because if you look into it, you might reveal this like fraudulent nature.
Well,
Or
what they and I, ironically, I have recently just I had this like encounter with someone who's really heavy into this, also kind of like writes books about paranormal and things, and he kind of said the same thing. It's like dabbling with these things, you don't know what's attached to them, you don't know what you're bringing to your home, you don't know what doors you're opening. So this is a very like popular frame of mind.
well,
So
yeah. So obviously, there's that whole Nietzsche quote where like, if you stare into the abyss long enough, it eventually stares back. And
yeah.
also, if you make your life hunting monsters, beware you don't come on yourself. So there is this lesson on attention here. Whatever you focus your attention on is going to drive your mood. So if you're focusing your attention on all dark things, yeah, you are going to kind of have a dark mood. So I think it's like the way you're sort of looking at this stuff, I think is
Hmm.
important too.
Sure.
Like you're sort of in a lighthearted kind of way. It's not like you're it's like to me, I'm always thinking to what end? Like to what end are you like looking into the darker stuff? Just to have fun and just sort of you're interested in it and it's storytelling and it's important. What does Jung say about looking at the darkness? Like the people with the darkest shadows shine the brightest lights, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's a complicated thing that it would take a long time to get to the bottom of, but I really think it's like, why are you doing the thing you're doing? Are you doing it to sort of deceive someone or some nefarious intention, or are you doing it just for lighthearted purposes? And if your goal is for like fun and bringing sort of people together like you do and entertainment and people having a good time, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's positive.
Okay.
It's like
Maybe we
using
can
people's
add a
garbage.
little like epilogue in the back of Ed and Lorraine's book. Just correction. Greg said as long as you're using it for fun, it's cool.
Yeah, that's basic. Dave, you really have a you've gotten good at sort of making me more succinct, right? I appreciate that. So here's another one, the Smurl family, which
Smurl.
I've heard a lot about this one.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. So this is a house filled with a variety of spirits and apparitions, and the residents of this house, or one of the residents of this house, are sexually assaulted by ghosts.
Yikes.
There's obviously books and films, and the
Was it
Warren
Jack or
um,
Janet?
both.
Whoa.
But no,
So
yeah.
how do they
So
know it
listen,
just wasn't them doing it to each other?
I know. Look, was that you? No, was that you? Yeah, like it's like a weird
Yeah.
sort of thing that was going on there. So yeah, was it Jack or Janet? Both of them were sexually assaulted by the ghost in that residence. We laugh,
Doesn't that
but
cancel each other out?
so did anybody? You know what I mean?
I'm sorry,
Or
Jack
or
and
they
Janet.
were
I
they
didn't mean
blaming
that.
the ghosts? Sorry,
Yeah.
Jack and
Yeah.
Janet. Anyways, so you know, Dave, like
And
what were
I
the Warrens?
I don't find sexual assault funny. It's just the way that we were framing it was
No, of course not,
more
especially
comical.
when it's
Yeah.
evil
Like
entities.
ghost, yeah,
Yeah,
ghost
no one
assault is
likes that.
not good. No one likes ghost assault.
What do the Warrens have to do with this,
So this
Dave?
was an interesting one, and that kind of ties into the Catholic stuff that I was talking about. So when the Warrens attempted to remove this succubus,
Mhm.
sexually assaulting succubus, apparently,
Yeah.
from the Smurl's house, they failed, and they had to bring in some reinforcements, which came in the form of contacting a future pope, actually. So at the time, Pope Benedict the 16th was known as Cardinal Ratzinger,
Mhm.
and they contacted him, and he pulled in some reinforcements to perform like a ritual of exorcism. That was, like I said, like Ed can't do the official exorcisms as far as I know, even though he's a demonologist.
So they're calling in the big dogs,
They're
not
calling in
the
the big dogs. That's pretty cool. They talk to someone who's a future pope.
yeah, look,
That's
they're in
pretty
the
awesome.
mix, I'm telling you right now. And so the incubus and the succubus are there's
One's a
those
band. One is a
one's a band,
band.
but both are sexually assaulting spirits, one male, one
Yeah,
female.
you can't
Weird
trust
stuff.
those incubuses
No,
and
I
succubuses.
know. No, no, you don't want succubus just suggests kind of dirty. It's a dirty bird.
Yeah,
So the other one is kind of quick. It's the Union Cemetery, and but what's interesting about it is you hear about it's a white lady ghost, and this is a trope throughout paranormal circles all over the country, all over the world, really. And it's usually associated with local legends, like the woman's never got picked up for, or her husband died on the way to their wedding day, so she's still waiting out there in the white dress. Unrequited love, he cheated on her with another girl, and he never made it to the prom or whatever, right? Death,
yeah,
suicide. There's a great episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And this girl like died on the way to the prom, and then like this kid sort of picks up this beautiful shining white lady and takes her to the prom and finds out that she died 30 years ago, whatever.
yeah, yeah.
I love that sort of there's a white lady in Chicago I know of. When I was in Chicago, I kind of heard that story.
I've met a ton of white ladies in my life. It's crazy.
Yeah, dude, I bet. Yeah, yeah. They're
That's
everywhere,
like the most
really.
unoriginal name of a ghost ever. Like
Yeah.
someone was like, I just saw a ghost. And they're like, what you look like? I don't know. You're a white lady. And then they're like, white lady ghost. Yes.
And you're like,
And it
yeah, that's
stuck forever.
yeah, yeah.
She's like, there's a lot more to me than just that.
So,
She's
Dave,
that.
unfortunately, we do have to get into sort of, I mean, this is all fun and games, but we've been kind of hinting at this the whole time. But
I think
the,
the whole episode has
yeah,
been
I
getting
there's
at some of the
there
criticism.
is some
Yeah.
criticism about and
I
Lorraine
know it's
Warren,
hard to fathom
and
how anyone could look at this with a critical eye.
a lot of people do have a lot of good reasons to think they're fraudulent and that they're in the business of deceit, which is, that's more of the devil's work than God's work,
Oh.
you know?
Oh.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things here that we're talking about as far as
I
like
can't think of anything.
critique?
It
I,
seems real,
oh, you of all people.
everything about this seems real. So, it's so real that Lorraine went as far as to actually go under scientific study by
Mhm.
parapsychologists at UCLA, which we talked
Yeah.
about. It was in UCLA, like the college that kind of like developed the first parapsychology program.
Yale had something to do with it too.
Was it Yale? I thought it was UCLA. I'm wrong, probably.
I think
Um,
UCLA is the only one that's still got
oh,
a
it's
little something going.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So a team of scientists studied Lorraine, and that was after extensive studies, they determined she was a light trance medium. I said trance. Just want to make that clear. A light
Yeah.
trance medium. And wanted
Okay.
people to misunderstand what
And
I
I
just
wonder what
said
these
there.
studies are. Like, what are they doing? They like dropping salt around her, or they're like, they're beating an egg and looking at it. Like, what are the studies that say, "Yep, she's clairvoyant, all right"? Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand.
I don't know. I don't know what those studies look like, but
Yeah.
it's just interesting. I don't know. I guess just even the fact that I was kind of like being a little sarcastic because it's a parapsychologist program
Mhm.
at UCLA, but I guess actually who else would do it? Because if obviously parapsychologists, like, that's up their alley, they're going to look into this stuff to try to debunk it. But
Yeah.
are they
Well,
already kind of believing it's true? I don't know. They're
yeah. Well, because
supposed to have a skeptical eye, right?
the paranormal the parapsychologists have to sort of validate them to validate themselves. So they
Well,
put
we
them in
talked
a really
about
weird
that. We're like,
position.
if
Yeah.
as soon as you debunk it or you say it's not true, then you are losing an element of parapsychology that is no longer be able to be studied, right?
So the genius of this whole marketing campaign is essentially what this is there's no proof for this, of course, but the problem is there's no proof against it, right? You're relying on sort of people's
Yes.
reports.
Yes, exactly. Right. You're relying on people's reports. And two things. First, Ed had a great rebuttal to this, though.
He did.
And I actually appreciated his rebuttal. Here's a little quote from him. He said, "We proved in a court of law in 1989 that a woman and a young child were driven out of their house by ghosts. She lived in Hebron, Connecticut. We went into Rockville court and we won that case. The realtor that leased her the house was suing her for $2,000. She begged us to go into the house and to get some evidence that would prove that there were really ghosts." He goes, "Now you don't just walk into a court of law and say, 'Well, judge, there was ghosts there.' You have to have evidence." So he goes on to just kind of say that basically the evidence that they were able to provide won that case.
Hmm.
So whether he was able to prove, like, show physical evidence of ghosts, he wasn't, but he was actually able to provide some sort of evidence that won him the case. And he says scientists will say you didn't prove a thing because you didn't take that ghost and put him in a bottle. He's obviously referring to Ghostbusters. Um, So and he said that's stupid. They're saying that scientifically you have to prove that God exists, that ghosts exist, and that there's no such thing that you can't get scientific in a supernatural world. So he said if you can prove in a court of law that ghosts exist and haunted houses exist, I think that's good enough for anyone.
Well,
Essentially, I think that's a little bit of like a smart move for him to throw in that part about God,
absolutely. I was gonna say
because as
that.
soon as you say that, who's going to argue with you, right? That's
Yeah.
if they're of people of faith, right?
He's like, "Is God not a spirit? Are you
Yeah,
saying spirits cannot be real?"
right. Yeah,
It's
because
like Socratic questioning.
it's so funny though, because like it's so true. And like you've heard me talk about this recently when we talk about like couples and stuff like that. Like
Mhm.
that blind faith thing that I've been bringing up to couples is like, in order to just believe in things that you can't see, you have to have a little bit of blind faith. You have to have like just this understanding that not everything that exists can be seen by the eye, right? That goes into
Yeah.
religion, it goes into trust with people, it goes into ghosts.
This
And
blind faith thing, like, you're putting yourself into other people's hands, and religious people are all saying that what do they say? Like, that's that saying that, like, one of the Jersey Shore people have tattooed on them, like, "Let go and let God." Like, you're just putting yourself into God's hands. Like, that's sort of what that's,
oh,
like,
I
one of
thought
the
it was
tenets
GTL,
Jim
like
Tan
gym
Laundry.
tan
Yeah, yeah,
laundry.
yeah. Yeah, it's that too. I mean, both are profound, really.
Yes, I just wanted to share a little quick thing. So I was able, like, oh, years and years ago, I was able to like accompany a group on a paranormal investigation. And I that was the one and only time I've done it, like in a group with people who are like I can't remember the name of the group. I think it was like Rhode Island Paranormal Investigators, something like that. I witnessed something that I was like, I just can't get behind this. Like this isn't me. Someone was claiming to see some spirits and did like this thing to help them move on. And
Wow.
we're all standing around them while they're doing it. And I'm like, I can't see it. And like I struggled with this. Like Ed would probably get mad at me because I was like, I I don't know that what they're doing right now. I don't know why they're doing this. I don't think anything's right there. I don't see anything. I don't feel anything. They're telling me something's there, and I just have to sit here and believe it. That was a
Yeah,
tough
you must have been
experience.
really good at pretend when you were kids. I like it,
I have a
when you're
great
playing game.
imagination. No, I have a good imagination. I just,
Okay, good.
as an adult, it's hard for me to just sit here and watch something that like there's nothing telling me that this is actually real.
It didn't feel authentic, right?
It
And you're like,
didn't feel there was no energy for me there. There was nothing. It
yeah.
was just watching someone moving a spirit along.
Well,
What would you have
another
done?
thing.
What would you have done?
Oh,
What would you have
look,
thought?
I don't know. I'd have to be put in that situation, but I do understand what you're saying when,
Like
I can
anybody could have
imagine
done
being
that.
in that
Anyone could
situation.
have said
Yeah,
that, you know?
right. What's funny is like something that is great about these movies and and all these books and everything is like they all kind of come with this disclaimer based on true events, which I love. And this is genius too. Like this is a critique too because, you know, even if like say you have the Amityville story or the Conjuring story, like even if the paranormal parts of the tale aren't true, all the provable events are intact. So it's like that's the loophole you get to use. It's like, oh, this is based on true events. Like I just,
Well,
talked quite a bit about the Fire in the Sky story, which is great. But it's, you know, it's based on a true story, but that's like, yeah, a bunch of people, like, went into the woods and claimed that someone got abducted by aliens, and, like, we just kinda you make up parts, like, that's what people left out of that. I wish someone told me that when I was a kid, because seeing all these kind of scary movies, like Amityville, the '70s one, did you do you that movie? It was horrifying to me, I couldn't sleep, and it was based on true events, and I was like, "Wait, what?" Just watching that, you're like, "This
well,
can't be true."
you know that like literally anything can claim to be based on true events. Texas Chainsaw
Yeah.
Massacre, the opening line is based this is based on true events.
And
Or
that's
not
so
based on true events. Anything
no.
can say that.
Well, it's based, like, loosely like, the idea comes from, like, Ed Gein, like,
But
horrible,
it
like
doesn't but that's not even like why
but it's not a part
they
of his
put it
story at
there
all.
because
Yeah.
it's just makes it puts people into a, you know, a frame of mind when they're going in. And that's the thing. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
stories. There's stories.
Yeah, they are.
They're embellished for so it's a good conversation to have because you know, speaking of previous episodes, we did the Menendez brothers
Yeah.
previously, and now that show has been airing on Netflix, Monsters season 2. It's all about the Menendez brothers, and there's so much that's dramatized. So it's even though it's based on a true story, there's so many elements and like big
Yeah.
things that are like not actually things that happened the way that like we know it to have existed. They say it existed, or people who were present and know that it existed. It's for entertainment, but you're
That's right,
taking
people
the
forget that.
story of something real, and that gets confusing. I've had to even go back and like I've been googling as I'm watching it, like, did that really happen? Like, how did we miss that part, you know, when we were doing our
Yeah.
research? Because researched that one pretty heavy.
That
um
was a heavy one, yeah.
so we just people have to keep that in mind. These are fabrications. They're meant for you to enjoy. You can't take it for, you know, everything is fact and everything is like exactly how it played out.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have to sell books, they have to make movies, they have to make money, they have to make a living. There's also a sex scandal involved in this thing, which is kinda
Mm,
sad, right?
yeah.
Where and I didn't hear any real mention of that in the interview, but Judith Penny, um claimed she had a 40-year sexual relationship with Ed.
Yeah.
And if you went for 40 years back, upon when they met, she would be only 15 years old. So that's not cool. And also, what I'd like to ask you, Dave, is how did Lorraine not see that one coming?
According to what I read, she did know, and
Oh,
she was
really?
she was fully aware and accepting of it. And that,
Oh,
oh,
okay.
you know, they moved Judith into the house, according to Judith. She lived with them.
Oh, my
Sometimes,
goodness.
according to her, sometimes Ed would sleep downstairs, sometimes he would sleep upstairs.
Well, Ed must have had a special way about him. And
So there's some sides of Ed, and like I don't think either of us have had enough time to do enough research
yeah,
where we
no,
could
that's
really know
of
the
course.
full story on this. And this is claimed, so I don't know exactly how far we've gotten with some of these. But I had a thought, Greg. If
Yeah,
if Lorraine was aware, right?
yeah,
And let's say this premonition she had when she first met Ed and she saw this vision of him as an older man and he's falling and now he's sick and she's by his side. She has this vision when she's younger, right? When they first meet. And she says that was the part we missed actually. She said when she saw that, she wrote in her diary, "This is the man I'm going to be with for the rest of my life." Right? Did we say? I
yeah.
forget if we mentioned that earlier.
No,
She
but
actually says this, right? Does that cause a sense of feeling like she needs to follow through with the relationship because of this premonition that she had? Like, I wonder if there's a sense of like false pressure that she gets. Like, I can't leave him. I haven't gotten to this event that I know is going to happen, and I'm supposed to be there for him, and I'm supposed to be with him for the rest of my life. Like, does she almost, by having that premonition and knowing the future, does it almost like lock you into something and make you feel like your choices are limited? Like, I wonder if she felt like she could leave. Is that even an option for me? I know I'm supposed to be with him when he's old.
yeah,
You
like
know,
what
all the,
happens if I change the way future is supposed to be?
and that's like a theme that you hear sometimes. Like maybe you shouldn't know
Butterfly
the
effect.
future because yeah,
Yeah.
you can make changes that, and maybe that's something that impacted her. Like, what happens if I change the future now? What if I leave? And also,
Or maybe that story that Lorraine told about her husband was just part of the narrative, and maybe she has to kind of keep this, Ed satiated with this, and they have to keep this story kind of just to keep a handle on this thing because if it comes out, then everything gets blown up, and they're not this perfect
sure.
Catholic relationship.
I
And
I
Penny
think
goes further to say that, this relationship produces a child, and Lorraine persuades Penny to have an abortion. And
wow.
again, this is Penny's claim. I mean, is it true? I mean, who knows? But this is Penny's claim, so we will say that in that
This is
regard.
the first time we're doing like a paranormal involved episode, and I feel like I'm less of a critic than you are.
I'm a critic.
You're a
I'm a
big time
critic.
critic of them. I'm
Yeah.
actually surprised because you are usually the one that's like really less swayed by the
Well,
criticism.
because I'm not saying that I don't believe that these people are experiencing anything, but I do believe that Ed and Lorraine exploited these people. So that's what I think.
All right.
Um,
You are entitled to your opinion, Greg.
Thank you, sir. It's me
um,
and Penny.
yeah,
We're in this together.
I see what's happening here. All right. All right. So Ed dies on August 23rd of 2006, and Lorraine dies on April 18th of 2019, and they are both buried in Monroe, Connecticut, if you want to visit their grave.
Dave, 13 years later. I don't want to say anything about,
Ooh.
yeah.
Not
So,
quite. It was actually 12 because she didn't make it to August, but
well, okay then. That makes it a lot different. So,
lucky number 12.
okay. So they also, something we didn't mention is at their house, they have an occult museum. You must love this, right? It's closed to the public now. And was open till around 2019. And it's just filled with crazy haunted things from all around the world. Annabelle's there.
I
I'm
don't know if
sure.
she still is. No. All right. So here's the thing I didn't have enough time to do research on. So I apologize. This would have been a really interesting thing, but also would have made our episode way too long. So the son in law is
Mhm.
heavily involved with Ed and Lorraine's stuff. And he also does his own paranormal researching.
Is
And
it
I think
Taffer or something like that?
it's oh,
John Taffer?
no, it's not John Taffer. That's from Bar Rescue. Shut it
Oh,
down.
oh yeah, that's right.
Oh man, I
Yeah, if you can get,
blanking
oh
on
man,
the
if you get
name.
that
I
name.
had it. I had the name and I lost it now. But anyways, he might have a feud with Zach Baggins, I believe.
Ah,
You know, Zach. Oh, Tony
I
Sparrow.
do.
Tony Sparrow is the son.
Okay. That's
So,
not it.
and I thought that Zach had bought stuff for his museum, which is in like, what is that, in Vegas? He has like that occult museum there. I thought he had Annabelle, but maybe I'm wrong. Because I do think Tony Sparrow also does like tours and like speakings and things like that. And I think he's involved in the
Actually,
Conjuring
it is
House.
ringing a bell that like it is ringing a bell that that Baggins did kind of get his hands on Annabelle for
I
like
remember
right.
hearing that, but then I was reading that there might be some like bad blood between the two of them. I don't know enough about it, but like it might be an interesting thing if people are interested in hearing more about like kind of the aftermath since the death. Maybe you can Google that. Um,
Yeah, what do you think's in there, huh? I mean, that's got to be a wild place. Didn't they have didn't they have a daughter?
yeah, that's Tony's Judy, Tony's wife. Tony's
Imagine
the
growing up in
son-in-law.
that house. I mean, just
That's
there's
that's
the
how you get a son-in-law, right? Well, I mean, I guess it could be you could also have a son to have a son-in-law, but
it could yeah. So I mean, growing up in a house filled with haunted
well,
materials.
that is the whole plot line of the Conjure. No, Annabelle 2.
Oh,
She's
is it?
she's home alone. The daughter is home alone, and she has her friends
No
over, and
way.
they're trapped in the room with all the museum stuff. Yeah,
Wow,
because
that's
there's
actually pretty cool.
yeah they have like and they did a lot of traveling, and they got like artifacts from other cultures.
Mm.
Um, so there's a ton of things from around the world. And they kind of like Lorraine kind of explained that like in other countries they're dealing with the same things that they were seeing here in just their own ways, or they're understanding it differently, or whatever, but it's all the same, like they're experiencing similar things.
Creepy, creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, well, look. So the jury's still out on Ed and Lorraine Warren, but all things considered, they're legends in the field. They kind of made this,
100%. Yep.
you know what I mean? They are legends, absolutely. So, you know,
they they are they've influenced a ton. They've created so much art and movies and books and shows and storylines. Yeah, I mean their influence in the creepy, spooky, paranormal horror world is undeniable, no
they're like
matter
the
what.
original investigators.
Yes, you can't take that away from them. You can pass judgment on them for
Yeah.
maybe their involvement with families or how they've kind of like played things, but what if it's all true?
What if it's all true? What if it's all true?
So yeah, yeah,
Well, Dave, I think that's all I got on this one.
okay.
But this was a good.
My only regret is that I didn't get to the museum before she passed, because she used to do visits and she would do talks there at her house and everything like that.
And it
And
wasn't long ago.
no, it wasn't. And I know people have done it, and I didn't really, I kind of learned more about them a little bit after the fact, and then she
Too late.
passed. Then she passed.
Yeah.
So, that kind of just begs the point that like if you're interested in something, don't wait. Check things out, go visit things. Don't, think things are going to be around forever.
You're absolutely right. Go to that, Elton John 15th final tour. That's what
Yeah.
because I missed out on that. I had tickets and I didn't go. Not that I'm the biggest fan in the world, but that would have been cool to be at. I was at the Paul McCartney final tour.
Hmm.
That's cool.
You are speaking a lot to our older population, and they are loving you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I know. Let's get out of here before I age myself
Okay.
out of the cool
Yeah.
crowd. Yeah.
Sure, Greg. You were
All right,
part of
buddy.
that cool crowd at once. All right.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe once upon a time.
All right. All right,
Back when
everybody.
Judith was.
Yeah. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, follow us on social media, reach out, leave a rating and review wherever you can. Check us out on YouTube. We don't get any watches on YouTube. We
I know.
suck on
Come on, get over
YouTube.
there.
It's
Get
Greg's
over there.
fault. Guy's
I know.
freaking yawning on camera. It's his fault. I don't blame you guys.
Which
No, but
what
if you do subscribe, like, and share with people, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you
Have a
next
great
week.
night, everyone.
Yep.
Bye.